Shalom Uracha, and welcome once again to Mitzvah of the Week, a division of Parasha Study Plus, under the umbrella of Tanakh Study. This week we have a double Parasha, Vayakhel Pekude, and there's only one mitzvah in Vayakhel and none in Pekude, and that mitzvah is that we do not execute anybody on the Shabbat in Bet Din. I didn't want to spend too much time on that one as we are coming up on Vayikra next week, and really one of the foundations of the Torah, and in terms of just how much at length the Torah speaks about it, and also in our liturgy and our Torah Shebaal Peh, are the Korbanot. So I found it very relevant to take this week as an opportunity to give a hakdama, an introduction to sacrifices, to the Korbanot, and we'll spend a couple of weeks on it, not to bore anybody, but again, it's really not boring when you really get into it and you see. And I'm not just saying this as a Kohen, but you get into it and you see how important the sacrificial services were and how they are central to our lives. But in order to do that, you really need to know the context and what our Gedolei Torah in Yisrael had to say about the philosophy of Korbanot and understanding how it affects our lives. So I hope to touch on that today as the Hakdama, that's our mitzvah, an introduction to the sacrifices. There's a nice picture of the Kohen Gadol sacrificing the Ketoret. Let's get started. So first, nothing can be complete unless we go with the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim to talk about what the philosophy of sacrifices are. Now, we want to tackle two issues. Number one, what is the purpose, or what was the purpose of HaKadosh Baruch Hu prescribing for us the sacrifices? Where did it come from? We definitely see that it would almost be counterintuitive based on what we know about, let's say, the Ikarim. We also covered that in this series, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not need any food, drink. He doesn't need presents given to him. So what's the underlying philosophy behind the Korbanot? That's number one. And then number two, which really goes hand in hand, is right now we do not give Korbanot. What's going to happen in the future? What's going to be, was this something that was temporary? Was it just something of the times? Let's see what our rabbis teach us. So we always start anything philosophical for sure, and even halachic, with a Moreh Rabbeinu Harambam. And Rambam, this is in Moreh Nevuchim, Chelek Gimal, the third part, Ma'amar Lamed Bet, if you go to 32. So I didn't write the introduction in here, but basically what it says in the introduction is that all of the nations of the world and the different religions, they worship animals. And those animals had special powers in their minds. And they would worship them and not eat them and, deify them. And this was something that obviously HaKadosh Baruch Hu viewed as repulsive. And the Rambam takes this and runs with it. And he says, Ukmo zot, and just like in this, Hahanhaga be'atzma min hamanhig hahu yitbarach, ba'u devarim rabim b'toratenu, and he says that, look, since the people, the nations around, the way that they worship their God was to sacrifice, to take those animals, put them on an altar, on a Mizbeach, and use animals in worship. It rubbed off on Bnei Israel as well through those times when we were idol worshippers throughout Mitzrayim, etc. And even before Avraham Avinu came around, that was just what people did. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in his infinite wisdom, that's what Rambam is saying, it said that people cannot just change on a dime. They can't go from doing one thing to doing another thing cold turkey. That's ha'hefech el ha'hefech pitom. A person cannot just let go of everything that he or she has done or had right away. And it says in the Torah, what do you mean to worship Hashem Elokechem? You have to worship Hashem. Well, how? The way that we're used to worshiping is to lahakriv, as Rambam says over here in the fourth line, if you're looking on the slide, lahakriv minei ba'alei hayim, to sacrifice live animals. Vehechalot, in the temples. Asher hayu ma'amidim bahem, hatzlamim, the other nations of the world, they would put pesilim there, and images. And what were we supposed to do? So we said that Rambam says that Ki az haya ze ma shelo ya'aleh belev right belev lekabelo kifi teva adam shu noteh tamin lemurgal. He said if all of a sudden Moshe Rabbeinu would have come down and said, okay, that's it, there's no more animal sacrifice, all you have to do is just pray and focus to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we don't need any of this intermediary. The people would have laughed him off the stage. He would have said, that's it, we're not going to be able to stand with this, Moshe. This is akin to somebody coming in our times and saying, it's as if somebody coming down off of Har Sinai saying, you know what, Hashem just said, there's no more praying to him. Get rid of your sidurim, get rid of staying in shul, do not do any of the, you do not need to pray, stop saying Shema. It would be a complete shock. So in Hashem's infinite wisdom, he understood and gave to us that he said, no, the people would need to stay with what they were used to, albeit in the framework of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, meaning Hashem would give you the rules, but again, it was always to make sure that we would be able to maintain our mode of worshiping from before getting Matan Torah, and now once we got Matan Torah, we would not be able to have changed right away. So according to this, we see, okay, very logical, like the Rambam is placing for us in the Moreh, but just in the back of our minds, we would say, according to this opinion of Rambam, it would seem to be as such that now, once we're praying, we've left Korbanot, when Mashiach would come and we would get the Geulah, there would be no such thing as any sacrifices. That just seems to be from the Rambam here. We're going to circle back and see that Rambam in other places seems to say the opposite. So this next slide is just that in English, and I gave you just in case anybody wants to look at it. It would be in those days would have made the same impression as a prophet would make present if he called us to the service of God and told us in his name that you should not pray to him and not fast, etc. So again, it's easy. Anybody who's following with the slide, you could just read this or pause the video here and read that Moreh Nevuchim in English. Rambam elsewhere in the Moreh, in Chelik Gimal Memvav, tells us that in connection to what I told you or read earlier, where he touched on in Lamed Bet, is that there was also a very specific reason as to why these korbanot were meant to be brought from cattle. ובעבור שימחה זכר אלו הדעות אשר אינם אמיתיות, ציוונו להקריב אלו השלושה מינים לבד מן הבהמה, מן הבקר ומן האסון, תקריבו את קורבנכם. You should pick it from the cattle, from the sheep, from the herd, the flock, because as we mentioned, that was what other people were worshiping. So we wanted to do the opposite. We said, okay, so now in taking that and saying that in that way, right, we are going to, in order to eradicate those false principles, we only sacrifice from these three kinds. So it's almost like we're taking what the non-Jews were doing and we're destroying it in front of them. Almost like very, very much like what we did with the Korban Pesach, is that we said, oh, you think this is a god? We're going to take it, we're going to slaughter it, we're going to eat it, we're going to do everything that you wouldn't do to this animal. We're going to take it and now make it kadosh. We're going to now show you the real way how to do it. It may, and we'll go back, one of the criticisms of the Rambam is it may look like we're copying you, but we're not. Ad sheyehem ha'ma'aseh asher cheshebu tachlit hameri bo yitkarebu el ha'eloah. Right, it says, thus, look in the English, the very act which is considered by the heathen as the greatest crime is the way that we approach God. So meaning a destruction of avodah zarah is at the foundation of korbanot. That is what it seems to be from Rambam and Moreh Nevuchim in this excerpt, Chelik Gimal Memvav 46, where he says that it's we're going to take exactly what the heathens think is going to be a crime, and we're going to say, you see what, if they think it's a crime, we're going to use it to get close. And in this manner, evil principles, the disease of the human soul, which is avodah zarah, that is going to be how you rid yourself of avodah zarah. Cut it up, slaughter it, mutilate it, sprinkle the blood, show that it's nothing, and use that as the way to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we see two distinct, two reasons. They could definitely work hand in hand. One is that the reason why Hashem didn't just eradicate it is because of human nature. It's very difficult for people to just change on a dime, and we had to incorporate it in our beliefs, religion, to have people buy in. And then, secondly, the Rambam says that no, it was actually eradication of the avodah zarah from our midst, taking what the heathens would say would be the biggest crime and using that to come close to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. We'd like to go now move to the Ramban Nachmanides, who oftentimes criticizes the Rambam, and the place where I found it, where I know it from, is the Abarbanel. Rabbi Abarbanel, again, great Sephardic thinker, highlights the kushiot, the problems with the shita of the Rambam, and again, it wasn't exactly always accepted, this opinion of the Rambam, and therefore different opinions of why Korbanot were brought are mentioned by our Rishonim. So let's see what the Abarbanel says. It says Kushiyato HaMerkazit, right? There are four major questions that the Ramban has on the Rambam. The first one is Imachen Ta'ameh Korbanot Rambam Hem Ke'entitiza Le'odei Avodah Zara Avodat Kochavim. If you want to say that it's the antithesis of Avodat Kochavim that was in the times of the Midbar, ואילו באמת היו הקורבנות רק המצאה חדשה ממדבר סיני, אשר נועדה לעקור מנהגי אלילות. לא מובן מעניין צמח סוג זה של עבודת השם. הייתכן שאין טעם חיובי לקורבנות, אלא רק שלילית עבודה זרה? He says, but there were many different korbanot that were introduced later on after Har Sinai. So could it be that really all of these positives and these commands that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us, there's only a negative side to it? It's only to combat something negative. There's nothing positive that's introduced to the Korban process. It doesn't really make so much sense to the Ramban, saying there can't just be a negative side. There has to be something that's positive, that's gained from it. And he sees that the Rambam's explanation is only negative. Second kushya is מה יאמר לגבי הקורבנות שהקריבו לפני תקופת המצרים או תקופת מצרים כתקופת אדם ונוח. What do you say about before there was idol worship, but it was just that was the standard? We see that Adam Harishon, we see in the times of Noah that the Torah recounts that there were sacrifices brought to Hashem. So if you're going to say it's just to uproot Avodah Zarah, there was no Avodah Zarah really at that time in terms of as it pertained to the Korban, meaning when Noah sacrifices a Korban, that's viewed as something positive, but that's not. It wasn't to be the antithesis of Avodah Zarah. That came before the Egyptians, before we were there as a nation. So how would the Rambam explain that? The Ramban also then says, "Hare zbichat ason va'abakar lifnei Hashem ena mevazeh et elei hagoyim be'eneihem, ela adrabah, hi mechabedet v'meyakeret otam." He says, no, that's a very interesting take that the Rambam has, that saying that, oh, you see, we're so against animal worship that we're gonna cut it up, slice it, and burn it on the mizbeach. The goyim are gonna laugh at you. So you are using animals to praise Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So the Ramban totally disagrees with the Rambam's approach to say that, oh, we're destroying the animal, and therefore it's the opposite of the of idol worship. He almost says hafuch. It seems like it's giving them credence. It's actually making them feel like, oh, look, the Jews are copying us because they are in fact using animal sacrifice to worship their God. And finally, a fourth kushya. We say hakatuv koreh et hakorbanot lechem isher laHashem. ולא כתוב שהם נועדו לעקור עבודה זרה בליבן של אומות העולם. He says, no, it's actually food and pleasing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It doesn't say anything in the actual verse of saying, oh, למען תשברו את העבודה זרה, or למען תעקרו את העבודה זרה מליבכם. It doesn't say that the purpose is for taking it away. It seems to say from the actual words in the Torah that it's something pleasing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so there must be a positive side. So it's just important to be definitely, of course, intellectually honest and see how the Ramban really goes at the Rambam and says that can't be that it's from Avodah Zarah. It can't be that it's just to disprove the Goyim. There has to be something inherently valuable in the actual sacrifices that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, this is the way that I want it, and not just something negative against the Avodah Zarah and something to make sure that people were able to be comfortable with their worship. So in this vein, again, because we see that there's in the scope of our video today, there are a lot of different reasons that we can say that the rabbis bring up as to what the purpose of the Korbanot were, if not to eradicate Avodah Zarah or to make us able to connect to Hashem and not let it be cold turkey. In my opinion, the Shulchan Aruch in Orach Chaim Siman Sadi Chaitziv Dalid really encapsulates this in an amazing way. How so? Because it says that it likens the Korbanot to Tefillah, and through this comparison of Tefillah, we're going to see that that's really the underlying theme. Meaning, if you follow like the Ramban, then really you're going to follow like how the Shulchan Aruch says. So let's read. The Shulchan Aruch says, "HaTefillah hi bimkom hakorban." Prayer is actually instead of or in the place of the sacrifices, the korban. ולכן צריך להיזהר שתהא דוגמת הקורבן בכוונה. The korban has to be with intent. Now here is the main point over here. The rabbis that are going to say against the Rambam, and even the Rambam in other places definitely hints to this. It's not exclusive of what he says in the Moreh. But the point is that it's supposed to get a person thinking about themselves and thinking about the sin. To say, especially with a Korban Hatat, with a sin offering, that what's happening is that a person needs to think and say, wow, this animal should have been me. I should have been the one that was sacrificed. My blood should have been the one that was spilled. All of the services and sacrifices represent something. The lungs represent something. The legs represent something. The heart represents something. The blood, the fats, everything that we use of the Korban is representing a different aspect, not only of life, but of the sinner. So in that way, we have to understand that it's all about the intent. And back then, the other living thing that a person would able to make this impact on them would be only through sacrificing another entity, such as an animal. We also saw this, if you remember, in our video about Egla Arufa, of breaking the neck of the egel. We said that the moaning and the terrible, the horrendous sound that such an animal would bellow out when cracking its neck would stir up emotion in the people. So it was definitely a modern day tool at that time, but again, something that could apply even to the times of the Mashiach, where again we see animal rights are very prevalent. We see that anybody who damages an animal, it's considered something very serious, again for no purpose. We believe that the animals, to eat them, to get pleasure from them, that's why they're here, these animals. But again, nevertheless, the ceremony of the Korbanot is meant to impress upon the person things that should have been happening in their life, and it's all symbolic. So the same thing with Tefillah. Let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch and how Maran Rabbi Yosef Karo phrases this. Hatefillah, we'll repeat it. Hatefillah bimkom korban. The prayer is instead of korban. V'lachen, and therefore he gives a list of things that we need to do in our prayer that mimic and mirror what happened in the korbanot. Number one, tzarich lizaher sheteheh dugmat korban bekavana. When you're sacrificing the korban, you have to have pure intent and know exactly what korban you're sacrificing. If you don't, or you think you're giving one korban and it's really another, then it's called pigul. And therefore you can't bring the korban, it's pasul. That's number one. Same thing as I just mentioned. You have to do it when you're standing up. You have to be standing up just like when you were worshiping. It has to be a set place. A person has a set place in the shul or set place where they pray when they're home. And there's a specific place where there's a slaughtering, where there's a sprinkling of the blood. Another character trait. Nothing could be blocking between him and the wall. No hatzitza. Right? Again, a person like a Kohen can't wear certain gloves that would constitute as a hatzitza, as a blockage. It has to be just regular, just direct contact. And you have to have very special clothing when you pray, just like just like the Kohen Gadol. So there was an entire ceremony that was done around the sacrifices that we mimic nowadays, the same thing with Tefillah. So when we lost the Bet Mikdash, the Korbanot disappeared, Tefillah stepped in, but then, theoretically, according to this approach, then when the Beit HaMikdash came back, the Korbanot will also come back. What's very interesting is that we see that Rambam himself subscribes to this. It says, Kol mitzvotecha emunah sheker edafuni ozreni. Right? It was a famous quote, and we say that all of the mitzvot are emunah, and right, and even though we stay far away from the lies that try to seduce us. V'chol korbanot kulan mikelal hachokim hen. And we say in all of these chukim, what is at the end of Me'ilah, Perek Chet, Halacha Chet, all of the korbanot, all of the sacrifices are included in this also. Amru Chachamim, shebishvil avodat korbanot haolam omed, because of the service of the korbanot, that's why the world is able to stand. Sheba'asiyat hachokim v'mishpatim zochim hayesharim l'chayei haolam haba, ve'ikdima Torah sivui al hachokim. And the Torah said, in all of these chokim, that you keep them, that's what's going to get you yashar, and straight, and observe, and merit in olam haba. Again, this is the Rambam talking. And the Torah opened up with these types of chokim. We see also at the end, so that seems to be, wow, the world is standing just because of the korbanot, and for sure, we're going to have to go back to it. And the Rambam says it black and white in Hilchot Melachim, Yer Aleph Aleph, HaMelech HaMashiach Atid La'amod U'Lachzir Malchut David Liyoshna, the Memshalah HaRishona. Mashiach ben David is going to now restore us and reestablish us to the way that we've had our sovereignty in the beginning. U'Bonei HaMikdash, he's going to build the Beit HaMikdash. U'Mekabetz Nidchei Yisrael, he's going to bring in all of the ones who had gathered, the scattered of Israel. Ve'chozrin kol HaMishpatim B'yamav Keshayu Mikodem, he's going to return all of the statutes like they once were. And here's the key line, Makrivin Korbanot, sacrifices are going to be offered. He gives another extensive list. We'll read a few. Ve'osin Shemitin, the Shemitah year is going to return. Ve'ovlot, the Jubilee year. Kechol mitzvatan amurav Torah, everything's coming back. And the Korbanot are going to be established. So how do we reconcile between the Rambam here in Mishneh Torah and in Moreh Nevuchim? There are many different answers. We'll share one. The Meshech Chochmah says that there is a very clear distinction between korbanot that are hayuvi, that are hayav, meaning that they're written in the Torah, let's say for the holidays, let's say for the timidim, and ones that are voluntary for the people. And when the Rambam is talking about that all the korbanot are coming back, it's going to be the ones that are obligatory on us, the tamid, the holidays, the national korbanot, and more of those private ones, the Korban Hatat notwithstanding, or the optional ones, they're going to be supplanted and they're going to be replaced because we don't need them on a personal level. However, we always go by Yad HaChazakah, and we see, it seems from here that the Rambam is very clear, and again, like Abarbanel and Ramban, that the Korbanot had a purpose. A person been worshiping HaKadosh Baruch Hu, worshiping, connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, having that kavanah, thinking about the animal, thinking about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu made us sacrifice something of monetary loss if we ever transgress, understanding that we love the meat of the animal in order to celebrate, which is still, to nowadays, meat is considered a delicacy and something special at special occasions. So we definitely see these two opinions, and it's interesting to note that what we said in the beginning of Rambam and Moreh Nevuchim also can ring true based on how the Meshech Chochmah separated it. So this concludes the introduction of Korbanot, which is a huge mitzvah and has many different mitzvot that follow the Korbanot. In the next week or two, we're going to do a thorough investigation and analysis of the Korbanot, the different sacrifices, what they represented, and how they were offered. Shabbat Shalom.